Like to call the March 7th, 2024 Finance Commission meeting to order. The first order of business is approval of minutes from our meeting on February 15th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah and Alan. Oh, no worries. Come join us. We just got started. I should also say that Kelly Newmy is not able to join us, but Ann Hanley just joined us. So, Ann, there is a motion on the floor to approve the minutes from February 15th. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. The next item is to meet with the school department to discuss the preliminary 2025 budget. So Dr. Thompson, Matt Wells, Teresa Stewart, and Anne Marie Mazzola are all here with us. Thank you for joining us. Who would like to start?
I think we'll let Mr. Wells start.
Okay.
The update of the.
We'll give an update. We're going to start with the presentation first. So on the first slide, we have 62,236,003 was our superintendent's recommended budget at a 9.95% increase. Applying the special education stabilization funds offset of $550,000 and a reduction to the FY25 budget of $565,000 is a reduction in offset of $1,115,000, bringing the revised budget to 61,211,003, a 7.99% increase.
Okay.
On the next page, these are some of the reductions that we came up with. We met with, administrators met together, and then we met with the budget sub, and we also met with our principal team. And we sort of brainstormed some ideas that we could come up with. Not surprisingly, most of them are salary, which is exactly what we thought was going to happen. We're just out of stuff to reduce. So as we went down through this, we considered a lot of different ideas. And they are sort of prioritized top to bottom. Green is what we really recommend. The yellow, not so much. Pink, no. And red, we did not want to go in that direction. Mainly because as you move down through here, there's more impact. It's more random as to what we're getting rid of. This is actually affecting people who might be working here. And on the last one, we have to, it's actually just a general layoff of 11 people, which also includes covering the unemployment costs that go along with it. So the first two items is reorganizing our central admin, and that's the elimination of the assistant superintendent position for $165,000, and then using our hire down savings, about $400,000 of those hire down savings, with a directive to our principals, which we feel is very realistic, of keeping positions hired under $65,000. Again, that's on average. We do know some positions are going to cost us more, but other positions are going to cost us less. So.
Okay, so you're looking at that as an average, not a bottom.
Yeah, that's what makes it achievable. Is, you hire a gym teacher, you're probably going to be able to get something, and you're really low. Special education teacher or science teacher, you're going to pay higher. So we definitely, we know we're not saying all positions must be below that, but certainly, and the principals are on board with that. We've had great conversations about that, and we felt that this was the least impactful. This leaves us in a situation where we're not eliminating anybody's job, which is very important to us.
And that there's 16 retirements that are.
There are 16 retirements, so this, that makes it feel very achievable as far as that goes.
Is that an unusual number?
Yes.
That is an unusual number.
Yeah, usually it's around 9.
Yeah. Or
So
10 is that's a decent number generally. 16 is certainly something. He did put on the bottom of this. This was after meeting with the principals. In budget sub, we had a conversation about compensated absences. We have compensated balances 67,400, of which about 54,600 is actual generating separation costs. There's no $11,000 there that we're looking into right now. I'm still trying to identify exactly what that budget line is. There are some charges there that seem like maybe it's not part of the compensated balances. So we're looking at that. That's a number that we certainly, in knowing that the compensated absences is being done on the town side, might be something that we can do a reduction. Of course, we wouldn't want to do that as a reduction. We'd want to do it to use that money to actually take and bring in some of the positions that we just weren't able to put into this budget that are critical to the district. After talking with the principals, we have a laundry list of but positions that are really important that we were just not able to get in there. So
Anyway, I mean, I think that paying for that is, we've set aside money as a town to
Yep.
pay for that. I think it would make a lot of sense for the school committee to spend those resources on something that directly impacts education.
exactly, yeah, and again, we would take that money for directly impacting education.
Yeah,
so it would be
absolutely.
student facing.
Yeah.
So can I
Go
just
ahead, sure.
clarify one thing here? So
Yes.
because the $550,000 is an offset,
Yes.
it's really just an actual reduction of $565,000.
That's correct, yeah.
So if you just did these first two line items,
Those
that
would-
would solve the problem, and
yeah.
you wouldn't have to do any of these other
Yeah,
things.
and those are the ones we're targeting. We went last night to the school committee, and they agreed that these are the least impactful options for us
Yeah.
to be looking at.
Right,
Okay.
so the top two green were voted in last evening.
Okay. All
And
right.
again, we're not done trying to find savings. It's, I bring this report up every single day and look at it, and nothing's coming out at me. But, we continue to have conversations. There's a lot of different ideas being kicked around. We listen to those ideas. I mean, we're gonna continue to think as we move down the road to see if there's anything that we can do that will improve this.
But I think that's also important because, next year, well, the following fiscal year is even
26.
going to be a more,
Yes.
shall
Yeah.
we say, a difficult year. So, anything you can come up with now that you can apply to the subsequent fiscal years, I think would really be important.
Which is a good point, because some of the things that some of the ideas we've kicked around, it's not something you can do in 3 months. But maybe it's something you can do in 12 months, where you can get something off the ground that, you might be thinking about. So
Yeah.
we are certainly soliciting ideas from internal and looking at a lot of different things.
No, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Jumping to the last slide, these are the positions that we have within the budget, and we were kind of brought this list into the school committee, recognized that this is kind of some position movement that we need to talk about that was built in the budget. First is our transportation director. He is grossly underpaid within the market. He is also fantastic and holds a wealth of knowledge in that head, and if he decides to retire, that's going to be very painful for us. So we want to get him up to what the industry market standard is. We did advertise and bring in a number of assistant transportation director candidates, and we interviewed them, and we came with a couple of finalists, some great people, and they said, no, you're not even close to the market. So we went back and looked at the market on that too, and that market on that is closer to $85,000, so we brought that up a little bit as well. The transportation clerk is being paid less than you can make at Dunkin' Donuts down the street, so we certainly wanted to make sure that we took care of that. She's absolutely incredible, has a wonderful way with everybody who comes in the building, so absolutely just a great face of the transportation department. This is the Assistant Superintendent of Operations and Strategy. This is the position that is vacated right now, will be vacated at the end of the month, and we will be eliminating that for FY25. And again, now we start talking about what are we going to do when we eliminate that, because this is a district that is the right size that really needs to have 2 assistant superintendents to support the superintendent. So what we're talking about doing is we're going to take the director of finance position and make that into an assistant superintendent of finance and operations. That is a very identified and developed position within the industry. There are tons of job descriptions out there. As a matter of fact, there's tons of postings right now as well for that.
It's a different skill set than just a director of finance.
Yeah, so it's more, a lot more procurement, a lot more project management,
Okay.
definitely a lot more leadership. So you're going up into the strategic section of management, and leaving some of the sort of day-to-day work behind. So
Okay.
now that day-to-day work has to be handled as well.
Yeah.
Gonna do that.
So we have an incredible team within the business office. And what we're thinking about doing is taking one of our, first off, we have a grant manager position that we can't fill. It's funded by the grant, so there's about 25,000 to 40,000 kind of in all the grants kind of sprinkled out there that the grant manager. What we're considering doing is taking the financial analyst and turning that, one of the financial analysts, making it into an assistant business manager. That person would take on more responsibility. First off, would take on the grant management duties, so the pay increase would be covered by the money that's already within the grants. So they would take on that role. They would also take on a higher supervision role and more of that day-to-day operations, taking care of all the minutia that happens just constantly throughout the day. which would take a lot of that work off of the person who's now gonna be the assistant superintendent. So the assistant superintendent still has full authority and full accountability over everything that happens for financials. But this person would do all the grunt work, and would be the sort of, on-site person who does all that supervision and keeps it rolling.
We might need to change the grunt work in the job description, but yes, thank you.
I was gonna say, wow, you really sold it, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's very appealing.
And
Speak to my people here, yeah.
Right, and you wouldn't be backfilling the financial
We
analyst
would
position?
not, exactly. So
Yeah.
it would, we would be absorbing that into the positions that we have. So net, we'd be looking at a reduction within central office of 1.49 FTE with this movement. So again, eliminating positions that don't have people in them, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So in addition to this, I should mention that for FY '24, one of the things we're doing is we have frozen, well, deep freeze,
Deep chill.
strategic freeze. It's a
Deep
frost.
chill.
We have
Frost. It's very
frosted the
frosty.
budget and we have frosted hiring. So what that means is basically, nothing moves forward without a discussion. So we're not saying we're not gonna spend. What we have to talk about is make sure it's something we wanna do. For the expenses, we're kind of done spending at this point, so there's not a lot that was going on. Hiring becomes really important. We want to look at every position that opens up and say, is it needed? Because if it's not, we're not going to backfill it. Do we have internal capacity that can fill that position, that can be reorganized and be a savings to the district to be able to do that? So that's we will be looking at every position that opens up, having conversations and seeing, testing those out. And if we have to fill the position, we have to fill the position. But having that conversation is smart. We want to avoid, throwing a bunch of unemployment costs onto the town side, which is, certainly, that's not really saving money.
Right, so the goal here is twofold. One is to make sure we're in a position to not dip into the sped reserve and that 550, be able to carry it over. The second is, in the superintendent's recommended which is below level service, is to make sure that we have the supplies that we absolutely need that we've cut out of next year's budget. So those are the two priorities from looking at it from that perspective.
And then additionally, the other layer is to protect as much as we can from our revolving funds, since as we talked a little bit about a BABC, less revenue is going into the revolving funds since more families can't afford some of the fees. So we want to be very mindful of the offset in FY '25, and that's another.
And of course, into FY '26, as we were talking about, that's not going to, we don't have magical revenues coming in,
Right.
unfortunately. Yes.
When some of these things, I know that has been changes in your employees now, and are you going to start now filling these positions, or are we waiting till?
The district needs to advertise for the assistant superintendent or the business manager position. Someone needs to be in place July 1. Otherwise, all of that fine tuning of the close of year will not be happening. Mr. Wells and myself will not be here July 1, and that is a huge lift. So we will start with some of that, maybe not all of it.
Most people wouldn't want to come in before July.
Yeah, well,
Even
even if we,
standard
right,
for the
so,
industry, yeah.
right, so
Yeah.
a lot of them you might hire, but they might not start till July 1,
Okay.
depending.
Okay. So you're actively out looking.
Yeah.
So Matt and I are currently working on the job description, and our incoming superintendent, Tim Luff, wants to be involved in reviewing it when it is done.
Makes sense.
As of last night, our goal is to get the job description on the school committee agenda on March 20th, so we can approve it, and then post it the day after.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And we'll recruit as well. I mean, this is certainly, we're not gonna leave it to chance.
Well, I was just
Yeah.
like, wait a minute.
Yeah. And as well, we will make sure that there's definitely, overlap conversations. So, definitely, I'm happy to hang out an evening and have them come on over and we can, whoever we end up hiring for the position, and explaining to them all the different pieces and, the fantastic presentations that Karen has started and that are certainly part of how we present our budget. So, the final item we have on here is the CFCE grant staff. So we have the CFCE grant supports about less than half time of an employee to handle the work that's done there. Now, the CFCE grant folks have said, you need to be investing more into this. Like, it's supposed to be sort of a share in how you're investing.
And CFCE is,
Coordinated family and
yeah.
community engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew there was community in there somewhere. That's about it.
So it's hard with two Cs.
Yes, yeah. So we put an additional 40,000 into our budget to supplement the grant, which is about 40,000 as well. They want to see that we're supporting this and that we're actually having somebody who works more than just 19 hours a week. And again, the position does actually call for more than 19 hours a week, surprisingly, with community outreach. So we have put 40,000 into there. I know that this was an item that, just in discussions that we've had, that was kind of an open discussion that was happening with the town, because it is a community position. I think the idea was that there might be some support from the town side on this. Not sure through the rec department or where it would fit in or anything, but I know that there had been a conversation, I think, that had happened before I came on board, but certainly I think maybe over the summer into the fall.
In the fall, at
Yeah.
BBC, it was brought up. It was never thoroughly talked about, but it was brought up.
Yeah. So we do have that in there. Certainly, if there was magical money on the town side, we would love to talk about having it supported there, because that's also 40,000 that we could also hire. This position isn't really working with kids in the school; it's working with the community and kids out in the community and families that can't be. We could certainly use that for positions that are really being asked for that are student facing.
Including some kids who are, like, the CFCAE includes working with some kids who are younger than school
Yes,
age,
both
correct?
of them are younger
Well,
than
they're
our.
all-
I think
Yeah.
they're all birth to 3.
Yeah,
But
do you want me to tell you a little bit more about it?
Sure.
please.
Okay, so CFCE, it's through EEC, not DESE, so
Oh,
Early
okay.
Education and Care. So by default, it's focused on birth through 5, but primarily birth through 3. And it actually has very little to do with the schools. And I believe the history is Carol Poirier, who was amazing and wanted to do more and more for the community years ago, before me.
Right, went out and got it. when it first
Went out
came
and
about.
got it and brought it in. And she did an amazing job, and Marie Kidd, who was in the role the past couple of years, did an amazing job. But they focused on one small piece of what the grant was supposed to be. And what they ran was a lot of early literacy groups, which basically in the birth to 3 world means like sing-alongs and story time. And then they were doing some parent workshops. But the true intent, and that came to our awareness when we reapplied for the next 5 years, is that's only one small piece of the grant. The rest of the grant is really supposed to be about parent engagement, parent education, parent support. There's a whole social worker aspect to this, of going into homes, home visiting, case management, developmental screenings, linking families in the birth to 3 world to pediatricians, early intervention, WIC. So really above and beyond what a public school system does. And although we support it, and I personally support it, we are kind of struggling right now to justify that additional 40,000 takes priority over many other things in our budget because of the scope of the work. We all firmly believe in it, but as of last night, we were talking and we're still contemplating, does this rise to the priority when we're trying to get into the middle school positions before FY26?
Right.
When we need a business teacher to grow that business pathway that is in our high school improvement plan. When our elementary principals are saying, hey, we really need another behavior interventionist because of the behaviors of the kids and the needs of the kids. So we're struggling with that as a school committee. And wondering if there is a way for funding from somewhere, at least for next year, for us to figure this out longer term, to keep this, because what EUC is telling us is if we don't find a way to fund the 40,000, we're going to lose the grant. And it's not the intent of the school committee for that grant to go away in the community, but just if you look at the scope of the work and you understand what it does, how do we collectively support it?
Yeah, and I would put forth that the need is even more now than it was 6 years ago and 10 years ago when this program started.
And how much is the total amount of the grant?
Do you have that information?
The grant is for 42,000. The other half
Per
of it-
year?
Per year.
Per year.
And we just started up the first of
Right.
5 years.
Right, but in order to access that 42,000, they want us to fund the other half of the full-time position.
To do all those other things that I was
Right.
saying. Because right now, we just hired a woman to take over.
Incredible
And
person.
if you look at the Facebook page, she's partnering with the library and the rec center and some other organizations to get the fun stuff for the kids going again.
Yeah.
But the part that we can't get up and running is all this other case management, parent support, and education without an additional 40,000 to do that.
Right. So,
All right, questions? Had a few so far. If there aren't any, I got another handout that I made for,
Thank you.
kind of put together. You are quite welcome. I had,
If you use color, she would like it better.
I was printing color over on these, so I just went to my black and white printer.
You want it to be
Conservative and not,
conservative and
here to
not
burn
spend
color
any
and,
money.
make it look like a-
But don't change the font.
Yeah.
Please don't change the one.
So I did have both of
Tony likes
these
to do
data
that.
sets. They were both sitting in different places. So pulling them together is a great way to look at it. So the first table is our circuit breaker receipts year over year. I also included the years we had extraordinary relief. I only have 23 in there. We are anticipating it for 24. We just don't know what it is, and we haven't received any information yet. So I would figure we're going to hear by the end of this month, but then again, it is, we never know. This is, they report when they report. And then, of course, there's the total receipt line, which is just the sum of those two. We were anticipating 4.5 million for FY25. Again, we won't know that until, I think we found out late October this year, early November. So, frustrating that timeline keeps pushing down, and especially when when we rely on these funds for setting up.
That's assuming 75% reimbursement.
Assuming 75% reimbursement, continued reimbursement of the transportation portion of transportation.
Yep.
So we'll see where they end up with that.
Mhm.
Again, we don't even, we only have the governor's budget really at this point.
Yeah.
We don't know where funding's going. So the second table is our actual out-of-district costs. Pulled the first FY20 through 23 from the end-of-year report. So that's the actuals that we reported on our end-of-year report. FY24 is our current, at this point, anticipated year-to-date expenses and encumbrances of 9.9 million, almost $10 million. And then for FY25, our budget of 11,871,000. And as we can see, this has certainly started to blossom over the past couple of years.
So it's pretty much doubled in 5 years.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And and you can see the circuit breaker is just a portion of that comes in. So
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's, I'm sure we probably have more students, but we also, those students, the expenses over the 5 years for teaching those students has risen
Yes.
also. So we're sort of hit with a double whammy here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was part of when they did the 15% increase for this year on the tuition cost. It was pretty detailed. Like 8% of that was salary. Was personnel costs that they were increasing. It just was exploding. No, they can't hire anyone either. So
Right.
this is kind
Yeah.
of,
So this is a nationwide and a statewide trend about increased numbers needing these types of placements, as well as the increased severity of the needs.
Yeah.
It's not just a Norwood thing. This is universal, but this past year and even looking forward, what's the inflation for this next year?
4.69,
Yeah.
but we're using 5 because we still don't know what the collaboratives are at.
Yeah, and last year we ended up being a little bit better than the 14% because we have so many of our students at our collaborative, which
Yep.
only did a 3% increase last year. So,
Yeah, I mean, you noted that this isn't just a Norwood thing and whatever.
Yes.
Have you looked at some of the neighboring communities and see how they've increased over the years, both in terms of dollars and total students?
we've not taken.
Lori has some of it.
Yeah.
I don't have it with me. I know like a
Okay.
year ago, Alan, Lori had shared some data with me. I could ask her for it.
Okay,
but
that'd be really
Mhm.
interesting.
But
yeah.
that might also be some of what we get when we do the audit.
Yeah.
But I can see what we have. I do remember
Okay.
Lori sharing something. Like
Good,
that.
thank you.
I can tell you, Dedham had $1 million increase this year in
Yeah.
their out of district, and $1 million increase in their transportation
Mhm.
because they contract out their transportation. So-
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. I mean, a lot of it was due to the increase we had last year,
Mhm.
which was unprecedented. But
Yeah.
still, these numbers are going up at an accelerated rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of shift. That's the part that's difficult. You're seeing shifting where they have to go from a day or a collaborative into a full residential, and
Mhm.
next thing you know, you're paying 300, 400. We have a couple that are over 500,000 right now.
Mhm.
And that's just, it's,
It is what it is.
yeah, and again, that's what's best for
Yeah.
the student, and we understand that, and that's what,
Mhm.
but then,
Yeah.
you look at the number, and I'm like, Wow.
Yeah, I'm just curious, you know, what the numbers are in some of our surrounding communities,
Mhm.
whether they've seen the same
Yeah.
trends as you have. We'll see.
That would show up in your audit, right?
Like, I hope
Yeah.
so,
Oh,
but
definitely. We've
I'm pretty
written
sure
that
we
in.
already had, like, let me get back to you at 3 a.m.
Okay.
I will find it.
Yeah.
If I don't hear from you by 2.
Yeah, right. Maybe I actually went to bed.
So you did, mentioning the special education audit, that was one other thing we had kind of curious about kind of an update on some of the other town meeting things. Oh, have you got something there?
I do.
Okay.
All right, and we'll start with the student services audit. So we have a initial draft of the RFP. Currently, we're reviewing it. There are some gaps in it, closing up some of those gaps, reviewing some of it. Then we're going to, continue that process, bring the working group back together, review, look for additional information, get that as a working draft. Draft will be shared then with the school committee and the FinCom as well. Then we've got to get it off to the purchasing agent and get it out. We're a little bit behind, but we are trying to get quickly back on schedule. So we have that started. The social emotional learning pilot, where we're going to bring in the coaches. We have selected a vendor to do that. Coaching for Change. We have a draft MOU for them to begin. So what they do is they hire and train college students to come in and how to mentor and how to do this work. So they will begin that. We've got to come back to school committee with a spending plan change because the grant that we anticipated using for that, not all of it is still there. So we need to. There is money in the ESSER from some savings in there. So we are on path to pilot it in our summer programs and into the fall of next year. And then the other one is the elementary study update. That is in process. We have our vendor, AppGeo, working with us. In fact, we just had a meeting today. All the data on where the students, where they live, all of the what kind of housing we have. We've asked them to bring in the 3A possible zoning changes in there as well, looking at the capacity of the school. So all that data is being combed through. There are weekly meetings with the principal and myself to kind of get that and answer the questions. We are quickly learning, as I said before, how complex Norwood is in that. So they're going to keep doing that, and we are pretty much on track to have that finished for the spring. Am I missing any? I don't think I'm missing any.
I mean, I know that I'm, concerned about the population in the elementary schools, particularly after we move the 5th grade over to the middle school, which all it really does is bring the elementary schools to where they should be, and they don't have classes, in the auditorium or in the gymnasium or in the corridor.
Right.
So, I mean, I think additional students in the elementary schools, could
Just sets us
could
back.
could be a real issue. We'll have to
Yeah.
see.
Yep, yeah. Well, they're looking at they're going to come up with different scenarios for us to look at. Everything, and it will be it's going to have to be a 2-step process. So you will open the new middle school and move the 5th grade, and then the next
Yeah.
summer, because that is just too many things moving at once. It's not
Yeah.
possible to, okay, everybody in the district get up, all right, everyone take 3 steps this way, step that way, sit down, move to the left. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah.
looking at busing and all that kind of stuff
Yes.
too. I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot of moving parts there that you're gonna
Right.
have to consider. It's
So
not
it will be
easy.
Will be a 2-step process, but and the second step will be realigning,
Yeah,
with the
okay.
5th grade leaving. But
All right. One of the other things I think we approved at town meeting was the superintendent search. That's been completed. I think it was a cost of $60,000. Do we know exactly what the cost was for that?
The warrant got lowered to 40, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's a contract with MASC, who was our consultant through the process, for $11,500. And then there are the legal fees, for the attorney with getting the job description, the search up and running, some things that came up during the search process, and we are still in contract negotiations
Okay.
with Mr. Luff. So that legal item, I was asking Matt to dive into. I don't know if he's had a chance
Yep,
to
we
yet.
are segregating all of those expenses now from each individual invoice.
Okay.
I've got Priscilla has agreed to help me out with that one.
Yes, so we don't yet have the total cost, but we
Okay.
are looking at it.
All right,
and,
when you do.
we will
Yes.
definitely share.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
because we
Yep.
agreed to return the money that was not spent,
Yeah.
and we will definitely do
Good,
that.
thank you.
And at this point, it's trending to be less than 40,000?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
And then the elementary warrant article, which Dr. Thompson just said, obviously we have our vendor, that warrant article was for 60,000, the contract was for 67, so we did use the full 60,000 plus reallocated 7,000 from our budget.
Okay.
And the SEL pilot, the full 50 from the warrant article will be used, and as you said, we're just figuring out where the other 30, changing which grant or ESSER
Okay.
funding that we are co-funding that with.
Okay. This was very helpful. Are there any other questions from the FinCom for the schools?
No, I think that they've done a good job here. Yeah.
Could I ask two questions?
Sure.
So one around the CFCE grant.
Yeah.
Is there any creativity and collaboration that we can think of to help fund that? Is my first question.
I'm open to that. I personally, it doesn't seem like it falls, that it's really, part of the public schools. When you think the public schools are for, primarily 5 to 22-year-olds with like the 3-year-olds with, starting with special needs, but yeah.
I don't know, how creative do you people want me to get? How creative do you want me to get, and how many questions you gonna ask me?
What do you think?
There's an option there, but it's not a great one, but we can probably bridge it for a year.
Do you think that it would fall under any of the people in the, under, what's her name, Tracy?
Stacy,
Stacy, rather.
No, I'd have to find a grant fund or a revolving fund that I can charge it off to for a year, and then sort of reevaluate it and see if we can reduce the amount or make something a little bit more appropriate. I can probably find a way to make that work.
It sounded like part of it would be okay under the rec department, but I was thinking more along the lines when you started talking about
It's not so much
reaching
about
out to other
where we house it, is
levels of people.
tying it to money that I can pull for something. So, if I don't fill a position out of a grant here and it kind of relates to that, I might be able to do something, or a revolving fund here. I mean, I can't pay for it out of a traffic safety grant, right? I mean, we can't.
Yeah, I was
but
thinking more in the social services.
I will look into a couple of things and get back to who about. I can do it as long as nobody yells at me for doing it, but.
I don't know if that's exactly what I'm asking for.
No, that's not what's being asked for. I'm just saying that that's a solution.
So that's one thing, if we could further have conversations over the next couple of weeks. And then the other thing is just around the compensated absences. So as everybody knows, in the fall town meeting, the school committee said we supported that warrant and that development of the fund, but we had not yet committed to being part of it. As we continue our budget discussions, if we do decide to be part of it, I think the majority of the school committee still has the request that we figure out the process. And that is just clearly documented. What does that mean if it's no longer a funding authority under us and a shared cost? And is it a revolving fund, or how was that fund set up? What is the right name?
It's a carryover fund. I forget the exact title. It's the same way that workers' comp and unemployment work. The process would be accounting would audit whatever comes through, that you're just charging sick and retirement, sick and vacation payouts when somebody leaves to that line. You are allowed to overspend that line as long as you have money in your fund. Obviously, if you don't, then it's an issue. And then anything that doesn't get expended out of the fund in a given year closes to the line, closes to the fund. So it's really just an internal auditing to make sure that when somebody costs something to that line, it's, Teacher Bob retired and had 12 sick days and we paid him $100, and that's all that gets costed there.
Okay.
It's more of an accounting thing than anything.
Okay, there's just also the aspect that there are clauses in every one of our union contracts around this, and the school committee is obviously the employer of record who does that negotiation, and that is up to like, how many days can somebody?
And that would still come through the business office like it normally would. So when the business manager says, okay, you know, this teacher, they met their requirement, they gave us notice, they're entitled to $7,000 in just sick and vacation. It's only sick or vacation, it's not ERI or other separation costs. It's just the code you charge it to is a different budget line.
Right, but I mean the actual process of negotiating the contract.
That has nothing to do with, this is a budget item, that doesn't,
I think we just need to see that in writing. So I don't know what the appropriate form is to have an MOU, but we have been advised that one is needed.
So, okay, so you have a contract with X union, and that person is leaving, and in the contract, they have, under that contract, they have so many days that they haven't used, right? So,
but just because, we don't have an MOU for workers' comp or employment, it's a statutory, you can only charge sick and vacation time at separation to this line. It's otherwise.
I'm really limited in what I can say in an open meeting. I just need to be clear that we have been advised there needs to be an MOU on this.
I
and
can
there are
talk to Melissa because it should have nothing to do with contracts. Your contracts say nothing about workers' comp or employment, we just charge it to those lines. where we
I
have it.
know, which is why I'm not asking for an MOU on that, because that's not something that I would be discussing with a union about. But I would be, as a school committee member, discussing this.
I don't think you would though. It has no impact on the employee where we charge it to.
That's not my thing.
I understand. Well,
So, I'm not, I think the intent of everyone at the table when we discussed this and when we shared it with town meeting was simply that we were going to provide a funding mechanism for the legal obligations that we have across the town.
Correct.
And the FinCom is having no role in negotiating the compensated absences with the police union or the fire union, and we're certainly not having any role with the school committee and their unions. That has,
Right.
like, the FinCom has nothing to do with any of that.
Absolutely. Just to be clear, we're only doing this because there's a statutory reference that allows us to do it. So this is nothing we've created on our own or made up on our own. It's just the expenses get charged there. That's all it is a budget line.
Accounting.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think FinCom could even, like, I don't think FinCom has any role. If you need an MOU, I don't think it's with FinCom.
Well, that's what I'm asking. And what is the process? I do not believe the majority of the school committee is going to agree to this without something documented.
Okay, I'll have Labor Council reach out to the school attorney and see if they can get on the same page, whatever that might be.
that sounds logical. Okay, thank you.
Well, the only other thing I could say is that, you know, I mean, we all know what's coming in subsequent fiscal years, so, you know, as you started to do, you started to look creatively at ways to save money. So I'd suggest you redouble the efforts next year and see what comes.
But also, that's still, we're not done with our budget. So
Yeah.
like the vote we took last night is just the start, and what
We
Matt and
continue work.
Dave and our
Yeah.
admin team and school committee and our subcommittee is still working on is the remaining of the budget, right? So the 61, whatever our new number is, 61 to 11, how are we fully maximizing that budget? And that piece has not yet been done,
Okay.
and we will be voting more on those details at the next school committee meeting, so that when we meet with you on the 27th, we can fill you in on those details.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'll look at the budget again tomorrow.
At 2 in the morning.
Not 2 in the morning.
No, that's me.
Oh, I can give you 3.
5 a.m. I'll wake up. Well,
Okay.
actually, at 5 a.m. I'll take a look at it. but-
I used to get up at 5 a.m. when I work for a living, not anymore.
Even on weekends, I can't sleep. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's my time.
Awful.
You
Yeah.
know, that like 5 to 7. Everyone
the
else is
quiet
awake.
time.
Oh, I got my coffee. Yeah.
So yes, we will be meeting with you at the Savage Center in the school committee room or in 219. I don't know which.
So I think so. We have the budget hearing first, which we definitely want you to be there so you can hear the presentation. That way we don't have to do it twice in one night. That part will be in the school committee room, but then it probably makes sense to break and go across the hall, I think, to 219, and then we can just very collaboratively be around the big table.
Okay. And then so FinCom will take its vote on the final school committee budget at that time. Okay,
All right,
All right.
thank you very
Enjoy
much.
these.
Thank you.
I have
Yes,
extra copies? Yeah.
yes. Thank you.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is a report from the budget balancing reps. But I think you guys kind of got first of all, I think both
You're
of you were
voting,
in
yes.
attendance at the meeting, so, you know what happened. And thank you. And we decided about a new bottom line for the school budget. And also adding in an HR position into the general government budget. That will support both both general government and schools.
Got it.
All right. So are there any questions about that or any comments about budget balancing? Okay, great. So then the next thing was we wanted to review and discuss the revenue projections, and Jeff gave us this lovely report. Thank you very much. Revenue collections are looking really good.
Yeah, again, for Q2, so a little bit dated, but again, everything there's nothing of concern there. You've heard it before, investment earnings and building permits are much higher than expected or budgeted, so that's a good news.
Oh, wait a minute, do we have more copies of this?
Should
Ann
be,
didn't
yeah.
get one.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
I got it.
All right, I was like, I know there were some. Sorry, Ann.
We need
I
more.
know I had printed one, but I can't see it.
Okay. I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
So like I was saying, investment earnings and your building permits are much higher. Mr. Mizuko's mentioned that in the budget balancing as well, so outside of that, there are no concerns from my point of view. Obviously, we'll be doing this again in a couple of weeks for the third quarter, so.
So
Happy
as of the first half of the year, we'd already collected $1.5 million than we budgeted for the entire year
On the local receipts.
on local
Correct.
receipts.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's encouraging. And in keeping with what we've been discussing. Yeah,
Mostly is it building permits and investment income.
Exactly, that's
We're
right.
getting all
Yeah.
sorts of revenue, it's those two.
absolutely.
Those two lines, and that will continue. Obviously, the investment earnings will continue through the end of the year. I don't think investment rates or interest rates are going to be cut in the next couple of months, so I think we should be okay there. But we are spending down the Cokie proceeds, so that will be diminishing as we move along.
Yes. Okay.
And just sort of one point as it goes to our revenue projections, we are using a lot of reserves this year and next year to balance the budget. But part of that is because we wouldn't want to permanently adjust our local receipts up. Even if we know we're gonna have invested income at a couple $1 million, we could adjust the local receipts, have more money and spend less in reserves, but we're just gonna be pulling that back in a couple of years. Same thing with the building permits, so it is just the way we're working it into our budget. It seems like it's reserves, but it's really just a more stable way to adjust our revenues.
So there are a couple of items that at first glance look like they're running low on this, but I don't think they really are, but I do want to talk about them. One is motor vehicle excise tax. We'd only collected about 13%, but I believe those bills all go out in January,
Correct.
right?
The commitment has
So
to come in, yeah.
this is to be expected.
So you'll see that update in the Q3 update. You'll see that much closer to budget.
And the other one that looks low is the pilot payments in lieu of taxes. I assume most of that money is light department,
Correct, which gets transferred at the end of the year.
and we are not expecting a change in that.
No.
Okay.
What impact has the non-hospital gotten to us? Have they continued to pay their taxes and stuff?
Yeah, actually, so do we want to talk about the hospital now, or do we want to wait until we're on that agenda item?
Okay, sorry.
Let's hold that.
No,
We
no,
can
I
talk
just-
about all the
yeah.
stuff related to that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we also, thank you, Jeff, included the estimated FY '25 budget. And these numbers, were there any questions or concerns about what we're estimating for local receipts for FY '25? This is helpful to have the detail rather than just the rolled up number. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then the other question we had was on our budget balancing documents, there's this sort of what looks like a new line item for indirect. And so I just wanted to ask you to tell the Finance Commission and town meeting about you know, like what that is, and why it looks different from before, and like where that's coming from. I know it's not new money, it's
Correct,
just a
yes,
new
that's,
location.
It's a new location where we're trying to separate out, according to DOR, we treat indirects as a revenue. We're trying to separate them out from appearing, if you will, anywhere in the general government budget, because it factors into when we're trying to figure out what the budget is going up and how we're allocating things. And in the past, it would be, well, it's this, but then you gotta subtract the indirects, and we wanna forget about that and not have to do that going forward. So next year, if I go up 5%, I'm up 5%, the budget is stable. And we did do a couple of funky things a few years in a row because we didn't have Munis up and running, so we had to do the budget in Excel, and we did a negative, it's just a weird way of doing it. We are moving past that, but that's the problem in transitioning software. So this way, that number will be pretty stable. We're gonna try to grow it by the general inflation, or 3-4%, which is all we can reasonably do. But it shows as a revenue up here, so that way when you're looking at the general government budget, it's the budget you need to run general government. Just like the school budget will be the budget you need to run the schools, facilities and shared costs are facilities and shared costs. It's what we need to run, and it's just a revenue source.
So the indirects, we're talking about money that comes from water and sewer and the light
It's the
department?
portion of water, and I wanna make it clear, because there's two indirects in a sense.
Okay,
Indirects are the portion of water and sewer and light that offset general government costs. So the easiest way to think of that is a portion of the accounting office. They have to pay for 10% of the accounting office. And DOR wants you to treat them as a revenue. You can reduce your accounting budget by $50,000 and book $50,000 in there. We're a little too complicated, especially because we have the light department to put it in 50 million places. So the easier way to do it is that's the portion of general government services that those utilities are supposed to pay for. Now, we don't do that with the two primary shared costs, which are health insurance and pension. Those get booked in those departments' budgets and charged to those department budgets. We could do it that way, but that's not really an indirect cost, because the 10%, and I'm making the number up, I'd have to go back and look at the sheet, but let's say we're 10% of the accounting office, that's not changing throughout the year, whatever water and sewer pays for accounting. We want them to account for their actual pension costs, which actually is flat, that doesn't really change, but their actual health insurance cost as well. So that way that cost is booked there. Same thing with workers' comp, they have a small line booked there, but we want to book to their budget any workers' comp costs, to their budget any unemployment costs, to make sure we're keeping the costs in there, because whether we're going through the audit process or a credit rating, if I need to know what water and sewer's worker comp process is, up until a few years ago would be, well, go through the entire workers' comp budget and try to pull out everyone that's water and sewer. I need to know what water and sewer needs to budget for, and they need to pay for it. They have a fund balance now. Same thing with light, and same thing with broadband as well. They need to pay their pension costs, their health insurance costs, and their risk management costs.
so if we were to look at, say, the light department budget, in their budget, they would have a line that says like payment for services from the town.
Correct. It actually,
So
I think
they
it's called, like,
this is our
indirects
accounting
to-
and our IT and our billing, or like whatever
Yep,
they.
it shows an expense on their line, just as you'll notice they have a pension and a health insurance expense. Years ago, we did none of this, and if you tried to say, well, what does the light department spend? We literally had two sets of books, because there was what we had to send to the DPU, and it didn't actually appear anywhere. I know it sounds terrible. Technically, there were three, but that's more of a discussion for another day. So now the light department can say, this is our pension cost. I'm actually gonna try to get Peric to break it out on the pension sheet, so it's even a little bit further separate, showing that's what it is. We just use a straight line percentage of payroll. But they'll have an expense for health, an expense for pension, an expense for property casualty, workers' comp, and unemployment. And charges from them get booked to their budget. Same thing with broadband, same thing with water and sewer. Any other enterprise funds, if we were to set them up, but we're not looking at doing that. We might do one for stormwater, but that's a minimal amount compared to water and sewer is fairly small in the payroll cost. Light and broadband is a 50-person operation.
Yeah. Sarah, did you have a question?
No, I think no, he cleared it up.
All right. Anybody else have questions about that? All right, thank you so much. I
And
think
we're not
that's.
changing it again.
And thank, no,
the
I
way it
think
should
this
be,
is,
and it's gonna be
this
going
is
forward.
such an improvement.
Kinda like
It
shared
is,
Absolutely.
it is what it is.
The 5-year decoupling and it's been incredibly complicated, and I think we're finally, with the work that Sue and Molly did, we're finally there with this year, and we never have to do it again, so.
Good.
Good. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is to talk about the schedule for the FY '25 budget preparation and review. We mentioned that we are meeting with the schools on Wednesday. I think that's March 27th.
Yeah.
Okay, but we have two meetings next week. one on Tuesday night which will be a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. We are going to start in this room to review budget. Then the Board of Selectmen are going to go upstairs to continue meeting on other things.
When are we gonna see a copy of that budget?
That was one question I was going to ask.
Sorry.
Yeah. So,
5:55 the day of the meeting.
No.
Or at the end of this meeting if you
Not
want.
acceptable.
yes, please. Okay, so Tony's going to get us that budget today. That's going to be general government and shared expenses?
We need a little bit more work on the share. I can get you the base shared budget, but we need a little bit more work on it. We got our health insurance numbers the 29th. They're no better than we expected, but we're just
But they're not worse.
not within. They're not that far off.
Okay.
Okay, so the shared expenses budget by Monday?
Yeah, I think we can probably do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So the general government budget today, that's great. I also wanted to say that normally the Board of Selectmen starts their meetings at 6:30. We normally start at 6.
We're gonna start at 6.
We're gonna start at 6. Okay, I talked to Matt yesterday and I was waiting for him to get an answer back to me, but we're on 6. Okay, great.
So that's Tuesday,
Yeah.
right?
Tuesday at 6.
Mhm.
Okay.
Excellent. And then on Thursday, we are scheduled to meet with, so a week from today, we're scheduled to meet with Facilities and Blue Hills. Have we confirmed that Blue Hills is able to join us?
They are double checking. They, I think they can. They are still in negotiations. So I have they can probably come here, but I'm worried they're going to get us a number much later in the year, depending on how their negotiations go.
Is it worth
But-
having them come in?
I think so because I don't think you're going to see a dramatic. I'm going to say our number might change. I don't think you're going to see a dramatic change in their budget. But Jill's going to get back to me tomorrow.
Okay, great. And so when will we see the facilities budget?
I think we are set. We can probably send that out in the next day or so. I'm just going to pull it and.
Okay, so that will go out tomorrow, Friday? So we get.
I'd say by Friday, yeah.
Yep, okay. All right, and then, when we're all done with this, we have a meeting scheduled for, I think like a Monday night, right? Like April,
Pete?
That was the one we had to switch, right? So
yes, Monday, April 8th, we are meeting. And I think at that meeting, we wanted to be reviewing budget books and stuff like that so that we're ready to move forward with that.
Our goal is by the last day of March to get you a completed budget book. So you'll have roughly that week and then that meeting, and then we have a couple more days if we need to get them to print.
Okay, great, so
End of March.
end of March for draft budget book. Okay. Great.
You will do the FinCom message. Is that going to be done after the meeting? Is that like the last thing that gets done, or how does that come across?
I've never done it before. Do you guys have recommendations for how we do that?
Usually the accountant just writes it and says, how does this
No, no,
No.
sorry.
I'm okay with that change.
Yeah. I mean, what I would do is I would just look at what's been done in the past and, make sure that any key points from this year or this particular budget year or if the subsequent budget year are incorporated into the message.
All right, so I
it
will
would
get.
make sense
I
to
think-
draft it before the 8th, but not like
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
So, all
Finish
right,
that.
tell you what I will do is after
The 27th.
March 27th, yes, thank you, I will draft the letter. And then I will share it with all of you by the end of March so that we can discuss
Okay.
on
So we could
the 8th.
finalize it on the 8th.
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, okay.
I don't know whether you keep your books or not, but I have probably 3 or 4 years at
Do you know
least
who
back.
you're
Oh, I've got more than
Do you know
that.
who you're talking to? We just had this discussion prior to you arriving.
Oh,
That's why this is funny.
I might have a problem.
She doesn't carry them with her anymore, so there's
You haven't, what,
progress.
back since 1970 or what?
I don't have them back that far, but I definitely have 2015 sitting in my
Yeah.
my bookcase. Yeah,
Blue Hills will be here.
excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Is there anything else you need to know from us for the budget book, the process of all this?
I don't think so. I think like we talked about, I'll go through just the same format as last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put all that together and then we should be good to go.
Okay, great. All right, excellent, thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion about the financial impact of the Stewart Hospital situation, is what I put on.
Hospital now. It's nothing.
So, couple of points in this, and candidly, all good news from a financial standpoint. First of all, if Stewart were to stop paying taxes, that's the best thing in the world, because after 3 years, not only will we gain a lot of interest, we could take the property and we would own it. I can assure you that's not gonna happen, because MPT or somebody will pay those taxes to prevent them being, prevent the property being taken. Prior to the hospital being torn down, the assessment was really only around $40 or $45 million, so it generated $800,000 or $900,000 in taxes. We're anticipating a large increase because obviously the value is going to go up significantly. The way a deletion of value works is your tax levy is not changing. So the only way the levy ever goes down is if you had an underride, which I don't think has actually ever happened in the history of the Commonwealth.
No, it's just a couple of times.
Yeah, like a weird protest vote here or there, but it's
Yeah.
never really happened. Nobody's had a real need to do it. So what that does is that tax burden gets spread out over everyone else. So that's why we always say if the value of every property in town today doubled, what would happen to your taxes? The answer is nothing. Your rate would get cut in half. You're still going to pay the same amount of money. Conversely, if the property value of every home in town got cut in half, the tax rate would go up. We can't exceed an equalized rate of 25 per thousand, but that would be a 70% drop in value for all property. That's not going to happen. Or if it does, we've got much bigger problems than the budget. So that $900,000 gets spread out among the rest of the tax base. Won't have much of an impact. Might be the equivalent of a 1% tax increase in a given year, but the average homeowner won't actually see much of an impact. If they sell to a nonprofit, it would be the same thing. I don't think they're going to sell to a nonprofit because MPT, the REIT that owns the land under the hospital, because it's not Stewart that actually owns the land under the hospital, is only going to get their money back if they're able to rent it to a hospital facility. If you, not that anyone was, but if you built an apartment complex there, a shopping store, an office building, it is not going to generate nearly the kind of rent that a hospital can generate, even though we know that this is a problem with how hospitals are now structured in the state and that payment. But hospitals on an order of magnitude are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of their operation. The example I always give is the hospital in Caribou, Maine, when I was up there more than a decade ago, serving just Caribou and a couple surrounding communities, was a $90 million operation. So Norwood Hospital was losing $500,000 a week when the pandemic started. So in terms of their budget, I don't know what it is, but you're talking about a $600, $700, $800, $900 million operation. You put a commercial office building in there, they are not generating that kind of revenue. They are not going to be paying that kind of rent to anyone else. So I don't think MPT is going to get rid of the property. And
So from your perspective, even if it went to a non-private hospital,
So-
the fact that,
let me just explain. There's two ways that happens, because one of them has zero impact, the other one we can still mitigate the potential increase in taxes, which wouldn't be significant. If MPT rents the facility to a nonprofit, it does not matter that they're a nonprofit.
Right.
It's who owns the property.
Right.
So an MGH or a BI would have to come in and buy the building and the property.
yeah,
Even if they did that, we would probably look to negotiate a pilot with them. They do pay pilots in most places, and candidly, we'd look to at least keep ourselves whole, if not go higher. I don't think for a $400 million building, paying $1 million or $2 million a year on a pilot to the local town is anything of significance to them. But again, we won't lose money out of the budget. It just spreads out that tax
Right.
levy. The tax increase is slightly higher in a given year.
yeah, because they asked for an abatement.
They did at one point, and they didn't pay their taxes on time, so they were not able to get an abatement. They wouldn't be able to get an abatement. They'd be essentially asking for a reassessment. I'll have to check with Tim if they have, but even the infrastructure that's there has significant value.
I think they did for this year. I think it's down like 12 or 13 million.
Yeah, so there's still quite a bit of value there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as you know, if they weren't to pay a water and sewer bill, eventually that gets leaned, it gets added onto the property taxes. If they don't pay the property taxes, at some point in time, we'll take the property. Rarely happens with commercial property. Somebody in a bank somewhere steps in and says, we're not gonna lose our $100 million investment because we didn't duke the town their $200,000 in taxes this quarter. So there's a lot of social impacts, there's impacts on our budget, there's a whole lot of other impacts, but the actual taxes that the hospital pay,
Yep.
that's not an impact and won't be regardless of who the owner is. Clearly, we would like MPT to rent it to somebody and the value to go up to $400 million, because we would make a couple $1 million a year, but we'll wait and see what happens. So depressing overall, but not bad from an impact on the revenue
But
side of our
in the
ledger.
meantime, what are we getting?
Couple $100,000 in taxes.
And they have already paid their building permit, and that's paid, and they can't take it back.
Yeah, you can't, once we've issued a permit, the permit's out there. You can't revoke a permit, return a permit. You've already gotten that permit to build. You can build or not build. If the project is idle for 2 years, they actually technically need to get a new permit, but
Okay.
there's a lot of flexibility in being able to say you did some work. And I don't know if we can really play that game with a new owner.
Right. And then the other impact it has on our budget is that we found that our ambulance costs are higher because our ambulance runs are longer.
Yeah, I do think I'm going to ask you at a town meeting this year for some additional money for fuel and maintenance for police and fire. We did it 2 years in a row. We kind of skipped it a year. There's the maintenance costs, there's the police costs, and we've gotten our newer ambulances in, but they're getting beat to poop with the additional runs, and we're replacing stuff faster than we normally would with some of the older buses, which we've had to hold on to. You know, you can get away, you can say, well, we're going to go until it breaks, but with a newer vehicle, you're less likely to do it. Don't have an amount yet, still have to work with the chiefs on that, but if we can probably do less than we did before, or just continue to do it every other year and just keep our fleet in decent shape. And then there'll be probably 1 year after the hospital opens.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Our next item is long-term agenda, but we kind of already talked through what's happening for the budget cycle, and that's really what I think was most important. So unless there's something else somebody wanted to talk about there.
No.
All right, great. Any other topics for discussion? Yes.
Months ago, we started talking about our policies,
Mm-hmm.
and the policies needed to be changed and that sort of thing. But I've been thinking about our policies, and I've been thinking about our budget for next year. And I'm not sure, I haven't really had the opportunity to sit down and look at the numbers and figure out where we are with this. But we have certain numbers in different policies that we need to be keeping to, if we're going to keep to our policies. And we know that that has an impact on our finances. And so I did pick out, a lot actually, of like our OPEB, pension funding. They all have different amounts of money. In our pension funding, we were looking at going to 120% of where we should be.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, what's the other one? Oh, a couple of them. So also, one that's basically, I think, addressed to the Board of Selectmen is to ensure regular review of all fees in all departments. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of our policies, because they were meant to keep us on a steady flow. And
I think in our long-term agenda, we do have somewhere out in June or July
wanted to wait till after
scheduled to review policies again.
Yes, and I'm not talking about reviewing the policies right now. I'm talking about sticking to the policies when we're doing this budget.
Is there a policy that we're not sticking to?
I haven't had a chance to figure that out.
Probably just OPEB. I think we were
Okay, because I know,
very aggressive in our OPEB policy, but every year in the budget, we include a little chart that shows compliance with our financial policies. and an explanation of, are we there or are we not?
Okay.
Probably using free cash also.
I was just gonna say, the free cash is treated as one-time, non-recurring revenue source to general fund and only appropriated for one-time expenses. Increasing various fund balances are retained as a balance to enhance the town's overall fiscal picture.
But I think that Tony's right that we do have this financial
Yes.
policy dashboard,
Yeah.
which is part of our budget book.
Yeah.
And so that will be part of our budget book review.
Okay.
That we will be reviewing our compliance with policies.
Okay, but what I wanted to do was make sure that we are compliant with our policies before we put it in the book.
That sounds good in theory, but that's not gonna work. Our policies are goals. If you're saying we wanna be compliant with them, that's fine. Let's call Teresa and Dave back and tell them to cut 70 teachers and I'll go, you know what I mean? We can't, our policy says we should do this. We are expressly telling town meeting, we are not in compliance with this policy. And if a town meeting member wants to say, well, why aren't you? We decided we couldn't be in compliant because we had to cut too much.
Okay.
Same thing
But,
with OPEB. I would love to follow our OPEB to the letter. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars more a year. So they're still, their guidelines and their goals, we're still mostly compliant. If the goal is just strict compliance, then you start the budget cycle with that, and we would never use free cash for anything that's not a one-time expense.
So I think that we do need to be mindful of when
That's
we're
all
making
I'm
that choice,
asking.
right? And so, so I think it's not a bad idea to ask all of us to take a quick read through the policies, and as we have our meetings next week, we will keep those in mind. But I do think it's also important that we report it out and we can have specific conversations
yes,
about that.
and I understand that goes into the book, but we have a job to do before it goes into the book, is to make sure that we come in as close as possible to the policies.
Right. But what I'm saying is, because this will be in the draft of the book, it will be a good opportunity for us to have that conversation on April 8th and to say,
Right.
like, all right, what are we going to tell town meeting about why we're not in compliance with this
Because then
particular?
it could become part of a presentation that we do to
Right.
town meeting as well. I think
Yeah.
that would be an important part of the
Right.
presentation.
Yep.
Because that's our,
Okay.
that's our charter,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Exactly.
Here
Just wanted
find
to
Yeah.
make
the
sure we
policy.
had this discussion.
Yep.
No, thank
Yeah,
you, that's
yeah,
a
thank
good.
you. All right. Anything else? All right, great. Motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Do I have to
Thank
stay
you very
late?
much.